What's up, everyone? Today we have a machine I'm actually kind of excited to work on. It is a Toro super recycler with a actual 6.5 horsepower engine on there. Now, it's no secret that I would prefer Toro pretty much over any manufacturer. They are, in my opinion, a very, very good brand. I currently have a Honda, and there is definitely, I understand why people like them, but there are definitely things I don't like about it. Granted, this also has its faults, don't get me wrong, but I know absolutely jack about this machine. So I figure we're going to look at it, and we're going to go over a couple things on it, and I'll go from there. Now, I think the first place we're going to look at is the oil. I don't know if it has any. It does, and it looks halfway decent, actually. This isn't that old. I mean, it has its scars on it, but this deck is, I believe, either aluminum or something of the sort. It's not plastic, and it's not steel, so that's good in my opinion. The wheel adjustments are easier to use. It's just all in all a very good mower. Rear wheel drive, that's nice. But now we know it has oil. It does not have fuel. This could be good or bad. Of course, that could, I saw a little bit of liquid in there, but it could just be water. Spark plug is in there. I say we pull the cord and see what happens, and if we need, if we need to, we'll take the air filter off and we'll spray a little something down there and continue on from there. Here we go. Has good compression. That's good. Let's see here. I say we take a Q-tip, a clean Q-tip at that much, on a pair of pliers, and we kind of dab in there and see if that liquid is gas or water. I guess a towel would have also worked. That is definitely fuel. Okay, so that's good to know. So we have no fuel in the machine. Let's change that. Now, here's the scary part about no fuel in the machine. This is why I want to check the oil first. Sometimes no fuel only means that there was like a quarter, half full, who knows, however much fuel it was in the tank, and then the needle decided that it didn't want a needle anymore and let the carb overflow, and the next thing you know, you have fuel going into the intake of your engine, and unless you were lucky enough to not have it open and this fuel decided to go out the other side, you now have fuel in your combustion chamber and goes into beyond the rings into the oil, and now you have gas oil mix. That oil, the oil does not smell like that, so that's good. It does have a primer bulb. Not too a fan of that, but whatever. Could also be the problem. This might just be a real quick video, who knows? Let me get a little more room here. Negative. So we might have a fuel delivery problem. Let's get a 5/16. Take this off. take a look at the filter. Oh my god. You know what? I am not afraid of saying that that legitimately looks like it has never seen any use on it at all. If I was a betting person, I would say the person that owned this let it sit, fuel gunked it up a little bit, and then they decided to change the plug, filter, and oil and see if that helped, and it didn't, and now it's on my table. Oh, that was weird. Yeah, I kicked back almost. I don't like anything what happened there. We might have a broken flywheel key. A real bad place would be a broken cam. So if you look back at what we just saw, you will see that it was kind of popping through the carb. In addition to that, it pulled the cord right out of my hand the first time I pulled on it. There's a couple reasons why that happens. The first one that comes to mind is that there's a bad timing situation. It could also be something like a hydro lock too, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we have a hydro lock. Of course, we didn't check the plug. I suppose before we get too invested into this process, we should probably do that, huh? Let me find everything, and then we will take a look at that plug. It most likely wasn't, and I figured it wasn't, but the plug is dry, and it looks like maybe when I used it was the first time it was used. So there's no help there. After that, we're going to want to take off these 5/16. Luckily, with this type of engine, it's really easy to tell if you do have a broken flywheel key. Some engines it's not. Some engines it's easier than this. You do have to take off a lot more stuff on this one. Like for instance on a Honda, you really just have to take off the recoil and the bowl, which is a lot quicker. But is it nearly as much fun? I'd wager to say no. That is not the right size. So in the back there is a 3/8, and in the front there are 3/8. There should be two on each one. The front ones are the long ones, the back ones are the short ones. They're not that big of a difference, but you don't really want to mix the two up because it's really easy to put in the short ones in the area where they should have had the long ones. Not so much the other way around. Let me get an extension. Oh, and here's a helpful hint. I told this to someone not that long ago, and they were kind of perplexed by it, and I always figured it was common knowledge, but I guess not. If you are using a torque, anything like an impact wrench or impact driver or anything like that, and you are finding yourself having a real hard time loosening up a bolt, a nut, anything, if you can take off the extension, it's best if you do, because the extension is going to kind of absorb some of that torque you're providing, and cause it to be lost in the extension itself. It's always better to have a direct connection to it. So if you're having a hard time, try to take off your extension. It just gets amplified if you have multiple extensions too. Which I suppose is probably like a giant no-no in most places, but we all know stuff like that happens every day. Get off there. There we go. Okay, we are almost to the prize. I have no idea what size this is. That's too big. That's what size that is. That's too small. That would also be too small. Quite literally, as soon as I turn you off, I find the right one the very next time. It's always how that works out. I have a feeling this has been worked on because I don't think that's a OEM fuel line. Okay, now we have that. We look at the key, see what we have. Oh boy. We have something to show you. So hopefully you can tell. Right here is the flywheel key. At least 75% of it. Right here is the slot for the flywheel key. And there is a broken piece of the flywheel key in that slot. So that is off. It's off by a fairly decent amount. It's like the entire width of the key is just shifted over. So that's going to be a problem. So when that happens, we do have to get that resolved. These flywheel keys are pretty easy and cheap to find, but the thing that you want to do is make sure you actually buy the right one. Don't put a normal piece of steel on there. So let's go ahead and get that removed. So we are going to get into sketchy territory here. What I mean by that is this. Putting the nut back on there, I'm going to find a decent place to kind of put a little bit of pressure. On this engine, it's a little hard. And something I do want to recommend is you take a clamp and you clamp down the bail so the brake is off. There's a small section over here that doesn't have anything on there. It's just basically the solid area. It doesn't have the governor, doesn't have anything, and you could pry on it. And this is the sketchy part. A lot of people don't like doing this, but they know it works. So however you want to take it, take something heavy and hit it, not hard but fast. That was literally the last one I was willing to do. After that, I was going to take my air hammer out, but that's just a giant chore. And if that doesn't work, then I would take all the fuel off, carb off, fuel tank, all that, blow a dry of fuel, and then take like a torch and get it hot. After you get it hot, you can easily remove it. Well, it should come off a lot easier. Next one is going to be with a puller. I just absolutely hate pullers. They are just the bane of my existence, and I just don't like them at all. So I really try not to use them if I don't have to. There is a tool that you can get from Briggs & Stratton, but the problem is the tool, it requires you to tap threads in these two holes. So it could be a process when you could just take a hammer and what you saw me do today and get literally the exact same thing done. Now you do want to put that nut on there, because if you don't, you run the very real risk of mushrooming the top. Garbage. And we do the same on the flywheel. There we go. Now, this part is pretty crucial as well. Loosen this. Whenever you take the flywheel off, you always have to re-gap the coil. So we don't need to completely take it off, we just need to loosen it. So now we can put the coil back on. Excuse me, the flywheel. And we need a new key, which I do believe I have a few of them in my little collection here. At least I hope I do. Yeah, here we are. So I'm pretty sure this is it, but it's literally just a small piece of aluminum, I think. Could be something else. It's a soft metal, and it's meant to be a soft metal on purpose. It's meant to protect your engine and you in an event of something happening, like you hit a rock and something has to break, and it's better to break that small cheap piece of whatever it is than it is to break this whole big piece of expensive whatever it is. So don't just grind down. So now that we know we're not supposed to grind that down, what we do need to do is set this gap. Now I made a video on this, but just in case, we just take this, put it right there. That's roughly 10,000th of an inch. It's the paper that I designate my coil gapper, at least for this. Some will require a different gap. Okay, now we have that done. We should be ready. I tighten that all the way down. And I'm going to put the top back on, put it back up, and bring you back, just the opposite of what you saw. And we'll see if it runs. So while you were sleeping, I decided to clean the carb. If I didn't, I knew I would have to eventually, so I decided just to cut out the middleman, just clean it up. I'm kind of glad I did, because there was a little bit of junk in there. Nothing elaborate, nothing extravagant. Let's give it a try. Did I connect the plug? I did. Interesting it is. Let us try this. Weird. Maybe I just didn't prime it enough. Let's put this back on and try it again. Except this time like 4 or 5. Okay, so as you can tell, it runs. Now, this is something that I think I pretty much completely forgot to mention. Every time you have a potential flywheel key problem, and I usually do this no matter what. The reason why I did it on this one was because I wanted to see if it was actually a true super recycler. Maybe I'll do a video one day about a difference between a recycler and a super recycler, but I wanted to see if it was a true one, and it is. It has the baffles and the everything, that like the little additional piece for the blade and all that stuff. I forget what they're called, but it just helps it mulch even better. But when I looked at it, the blade itself, it could be a tad low in oil, looked to be fine. So when you look at it, you want to make sure that there is no giant chunks missing, it's not bent, nothing like that. Give it a kiss of oil. And I didn't see anything like that, so I don't really know why that occurred, but it did, and we have now fixed it. So how do we know this is happening? One, when I pull on everything, I don't know the conditions, so I keep a very loose grip on it in case it's going to pop out. That's exactly what happened. What ends up happening is if it's out of time, which the flywheel keeps it in time with that key, it will potentially ignite too fast, and the piston will try to go backwards and pull your recoil right out of your hand. You can even injure yourself, and if it's really violent, or if you just have a death grip on it. Or it could pop through the carb. You could hear like a backfire almost going through the exhaust. You know, there's a couple things that it will tell you it's out of time. I felt it pop through the, or excuse me, I felt it pull the recoil or the rope out of my hand a little bit, and I saw it popping through the intake of the exhaust, the carburetor. That tells me that the intake valve is open. So it's not a good thing when that happens, because it's not going to be able to obviously run. So if you ever come across that, this is what you end up having to do. If for some reason this was completely fine, there was no anything, there was no nothing with the flywheel, you pretty much have two, that I would assume, two options. One, your coil is either damaged, improperly installed, or just malfunctioning, and it's firing at the wrong time. I guess potentially even your spark plug, but that's pretty far-fetched. I don't think I've ever heard that happening, but I suppose it could. The other one is your cam. Your cam lobes could have slipped off. I think they're pressed on, if I remember correctly, and they might even be plastic. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are plastic. So if they were to break or they lose their fitting, they could be going off at the wrong time. The only thing you could do is to open it up, put a new cam in, and that could be a lot of work and very expensive. It might be easier just to get a new engine or a new mower, or even buy a used mower, just put the new engine on it. You know, whatever you want to do. But that's pretty much the thing that you are going to be expecting. 98% of the time, though, it's your flywheel key. So go ahead and check that like we did today. You should be good to go. This works for all styles of engines. You just need to look at the flywheel and see if you can see the key. Some of them you might have to actually take off just to even see the location of the key, but it's not too often. Even with Hondas, you could kind of tell if they're a little off. It's a little harder, it's not as pronounced, but you can tell. Tecumsehs are very easy as well. But other than that, looks like we're good to go. So hopefully this helped you out. Definitely like and subscribe if you liked it. Put a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and I'll catch you on the next video. Have a good night.